Hi everyone, welcome back to the U.S. History Part B final exam. This is part 2 of the recording and we'll be picking up with question number 35. 35, what was the significance of the landmark Supreme Court decision in Brown v. Board of Education? Public school choice was no longer legal. Separate but equal schools were inherently unequal and unconstitutional. The principle of separate but equal schools was acceptable. Number 36, what was the outcome of the Cuban Missile Crisis? The United States agreed that it was up to the Cuban government to allow the missiles or not. The United Nations intervened and achieved successful negotiations with all parties. The Soviet Union removed its missiles from Cuba, and the United States agreed to remove its missiles from Turkey. Number 37, what was the domino theory? The belief that if one Southeast Asian nation fell to communism, others would follow. The idea that the situation in Southeast Asia would require a blocking strategy, or the belief that the nations in Southeast Asia needed to align with one another. What view of the Vietnam War led to objections about U.S. participation there? The country was too small to worry about, the United States was interfering in another nation's civil war, or the Vietnamese should seek assistance from nations that were closer. Number 39, what was the eventual outcome of the Vietnam War? A ceasefire led to the establishment of a neutral zone between North Vietnam and South Vietnam. The fall of Hanoi led to a unified democratic Vietnam, or the fall of Saigon led to a unified communist Vietnam. Number 40, what 1960s group opposed the traditional values of the establishment? The counterculture, the draft dodgers, or the religious right. Number 41, what was not part of the second wave of the women's movement? Passage of the Equal Rights Amendment, the case of Roe v. Wade, or increased enrollment of women in professional schools. Number 42, what inspired gays and lesbians, American Indians, and Hispanics to organize and advocate for their civil rights during the 1960s? African Americans' success with their civil rights movement, the political achievements of the women's movement, or television shows that featured them as leading characters. 43, what was one thing President Nixon did in an attempt to improve relations with the Soviet Union? Establish relations with China, provided foreign aid to relieve Soviet poverty, or assured the Soviet Union a permanent seat on the United Nations Security Council. Number 44, what was the ultimate outcome of the Supreme Court order for Richard Nixon to turn information over to Congress? Nixon attempted to get Congress to override the decision. Nixon turned over the information and was later impeached, or Nixon resigned as president. Number 45, what series of events in the 1970s caused people to become more skeptical about politics and less trusting of government? Economic stagflation, the Watergate scandal, or the Arab oil embargo. Number 46, what two issues did different groups of Reagan supporters agree on during the 1980s election? Reduce government regulation and limits on military spending, open borders for immigration and higher taxes, a forceful foreign policy, and a strong military. Number 47, why did some people support supply-side economics and others opposed it? It called for large tax cuts for the wealthy. It addressed the supply of goods and ignored demand. Foreign production played a significant role in the plan. Number 48, what were the results of Ronald Reagan's efforts to fight the Cold War and reduce the size of the federal deficit? He was unsuccessful in both. He was unsuccessful in fighting the Cold War and successful in reducing the deficit, or he was successful in fighting the Cold War and unsuccessful in reducing the deficit. Number 49, what is one reason that President George H.W. Bush wanted to avoid a long-term war in Iraq? He thought that the Iraqis had made amends for their invasion of Kuwait, other nations in the area did not support long-term U.S. involvement there, or he believed that Saddam Hussein was an effective leader. Number 50, what initially made the internet widely accessible? Internet service providers offering low-cost services, the development of the World Wide Web, or telephone companies making the transition to internet services. Number 51, what legislation was intended to improve U.S. security, but also raise concerns about American civil liberties? The Patriot Act, the Homeland Security Bill, or the American Anti-Terrorism Act? Number 52, what accusation was given by President Bush as a reason for invading Iraq, but later proved false? Iraq had oil that belonged to the United States and Saddam Hussein was refusing to release it. Osama bin Laden was hiding in Iraq, or Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction. Number 53, what was one reason people opposed the war in Iraq? Only a few allies were willing to help, healthcare should take priority, or the United States started a war without provocation from another country. Number 54, what was one effect of unrestricted German warfare attacks on shipping in World War I? The United States led the Berlin airlift. The German Navy became the most powerful naval force in the world. The United States moved closer to declaring war on Germany. Number 55, which progressive president oversaw the building of the Panama Canal, emphasized conservation, and established some national parks? William McKinley, Theodore Roosevelt, or William Howard Taft? Number 56, what number shows a country where the United States has been engaged in a war that should say from 2003 to 2009, and also was engaged in a war there in the early 1990s? Was it 2, 3, or 4? What is the significance of September 11th, 2001? It marked the end of the Persian Gulf War against Iraq, the Soviet Union collapsed, officially ending the Cold War, or terrorists sent by Al-Qaeda and Osama bin Laden used airplanes to attack targets in the United States, killing thousands. That brings us to the end of your modified test. Please make sure that you have checked all your answers, clicked save as you go, and click submit so it was submitted to the gradebook. Good luck!